Last Christmas, I was invited to a concert by a trio called Gilu. And the trio is headed up by Veronique de Rademacher, who was one of the Young Belgian Talent Classical Musician Competition's finalists, I think, back in 2015. I was so impressed with the trio, which was harp, soprano and violin, that I decided there and then that I wanted to record it and make an LP and a CD of their music, because I think, although it's classical, it's so beautiful, so magical, that if I could somehow capture that, it would be great to share it with everyone. Luckily enough, the director of music from Young Belgian Talent was with me, Greet van der Veld, and she found it a great idea. So this is the beginning of a series of video clips which we're going to edit together, where I want to take the great recordings theme that I've been working on recently and show you, let's make a great recording. How would we do it? Now, I'm not saying this is going to be a great recording on the Jacqueline Dupre or the Daft Punk level or Dark Side of the Moon. Of course not. But I want to show you the process that I go through, because every recording engineer, every musician, every producer hopes that the recording they're about to make is going to be the one. It's the one that will establish them in their career or re-establish them in their careers. And of course, we want to touch people. We want to share with them the experience we have. So I experienced a fabulous live concert in a chapel just before Christmas with this beautiful music. And I want to try and see if somehow through this process we can capture that magic. So join me if you will, and let's switch to the recording location and see what happens there.
We've already agreed that the most important thing to get a really great recording is to have an inspirational location. And usually I would go for something safe, like Flagey Studio 4, Studio 1, a studio where you have everything under control. But this time we're going to push the boat out and try something a little bit different. Our violinist, Veronique de Rademacher, heard about this location and she said, "Harley, you've got to come and see this." So here we are. We're in a special ballroom from I guess from the 19th century. This used to be a hotel, probably late because it's got a kind of Art Deco influence. And this wonderful space, as I say, was the main ballroom for the hotel. But today it's in transition. On Monday, when we've finished shooting here and recording here in the next 3 days, this is going to become an IT office. And all this area will be full of desks and IT engineers. But for now, for the next 3 days, we have this unique opportunity to turn this into our recording studio. But why would I want to do that? Because the echo, the acoustic, is fabulous for the kind of music that we're going to record. It's not too long, it's not too short, but there is, in certain places, a little complex. Sometimes the echo can hit and reflect back in a way that we don't want it to. So my secret is to find the best place to place our 3 instruments. So first of all, the harp. Where do we put the harp? I'm looking for some space, and I'm hoping that this parabole shape is going to reflect the sound of that harp, to fill the whole space. So when we're listening to the recording at home, we're going to have the whole room filled with this lovely harp sound, and then just the localization left and right of our singer soprano on the left and our violin on the right. But I need to get the positioning right so we don't have annoying reflections and echoes. So let's just see. Here's good. Sometimes 20 centimeters left or right can make a real difference. Maxim, can you put a cross here, and then we can get the harp there, if you wouldn't mind. If we pop it just there. Fantastic. So now the violin. Now violinists the musicians like to stick close together, but for recordings, so making a great audio CD and LP, I'd like to get a bit more space so that afterwards in post-production, we can make sure that not everything's on top of each other. Otherwise you have sound creeping in from one microphone to the other. So in an ideal world, I'd put Veronique here, but I think that's probably going to be too far. But let's see what the echo is like. Oh, that's not bad. It's a little bit thin. Now, that's a deeper sound. You see, I've just gone literally half a meter back and everything's perfect. So this is, Maxim, is where I'm going to have Veronique, please, our violinist. And the violin sound is going to go up and in this direction. The harp is going to fill the space, but we have our singer. Now, the singer's much more directional. So she's going to be on this left-hand side, and I'm just wondering if we get it near this hallway, we get a little bit more echo. I don't want it to be annoying, especially when she's singing short staccato notes. We don't want too much echo. But that's a nice full sound here, but I'm a bit annoyed about I'm getting a reflection from here that I don't like. Here's better. This wall is now protecting us. So Maxim, we're going to put a cross here and see how this works. Okay, that's great. So now we know where we want to put the microphone stands. You can place a stand on the crosses, Maxim, that's absolutely fine. And then we will now set up and try and select the microphones. Now I do this one at a time. It takes a bit of patience because the secret of a great recording is not the microphone you use, but where you place it. And I'll show you that in a second. Okay, that's good. The most important piece of equipment in a recording studio is not the microphone or the recorder, it's a pair of step ladders. And why is this so important? Because the secret is to get that microphone in exactly the right place. And every hall, every room has its different acoustic, its different vibe. And also every instrument. Now, I've recorded Veronique before, and I know her violin pretty well, so I can guess, but I can never be sure. And there's only one way to tell, and that's to get your ladders, put them next to the musician. Hi, Veronique, sorry about this. Well, you're used to me by now. So if you could just play me some notes, and I'm going to listen to the violin, and I'm going to compare the sound of the violin with the echo. At this point, I'm listening to the violin. This is too close. Which is too far now. There's too much echo and not enough body. So actually here, I need it quite close. I need this microphone at this height. Okay, so if you can follow that one, Maxim, that's great. So I'll leave that one to you. Good, thank you. AKG on figure of 8 there. Huh? One of the interesting things about singers is what comes out of their mouth here is all the high frequencies, all these things, but actually it's from the chest where you actually get deeper sounds. So sometimes having it a little bit lower or having a second one a little bit lower can work really well. But I think in Maria's case, this is absolutely fine. I don't want to catch too much for what's bouncing off the ceiling. This should work fine, yeah? All of these people will be watching this performance and enjoying it, hopefully around Christmas time when the LP comes out.
Working with Grete van der Veld as our producer is such a privilege because not only is she a musicologist, but she's a very experienced program maker for the Belgian national classical music station, Clara. And she sees the role of producer as three themes. Firstly, it's to produce and take responsibility to deliver a product, in our case an LP and a CD. And then it's to work with the musicians to develop the content, to make a theme, to bring it all together. And of course the LP has two sides, so it's like a little mini concert in itself with a small intermission in between. And she's very aware of this. But for me as a recording engineer, her biggest role is in the recording studio, working with the musicians, following the scores, making sure that everything is perfect, correcting any tiny little mistakes, interpretation, discussions, and in a very collaborative way, bringing their performance to an ever higher level, which is an absolute benefit for everyone. For the Gilu project, I brought in the renowned Dutch mastering engineer Erik van Dorn. I wanted him specifically because of his extensive experience in mastering for both vinyl and CD. And I managed to catch up with him at the Hi-Fi show in the Netherlands this year. And I began by asking him how he got into mastering in the first place.
I started working for Polygram Record Services in 1991. I was heading the department where we were making master tapes for cassette duplication and cutting records for LP production. And as a sideline, we had a CD mastering studio. And I started working as a mastering engineer there first. Later I headed the department, and I've ever since been into mastering. And after a couple of years, I went to work for a real mastering studio, a CD mastering studio. I left that studio in 1997 to found my own company, Masters of Media, which is still my own company today. We exist 25 years. For vinyl, there is the fact that you have very limited signal to noise ratio. If you're lucky, you can get 30, 35, 40 dB of signal to noise, which means you'll have to take that into account if you prepare a master. You will make sure that the softest audio is not drowning in the noise of the LP. On a CD, the noise floor is much, much lower, and you can have a much bigger dynamic range. So for that, yes, you'll have to compress. But in practice, most audio, especially for pop music nowadays, has a limited signal to noise ratio anyway, or very low dynamics. So you shouldn't care or worry about that. It goes automatically. But for classical music, you'll really have to be aware that the softest parts of the music have to be audible too. When we go for the high-res download, we basically go for no compression, maybe a little bit of EQ, and of course be careful with what we add in terms of artificial reverb if we need it. And we take as much advantage of the headroom that we have of the signal to noise ratio there. If we go for CD, we already have to restrict a little bit, and we have to take into account that not everybody has a super hi-fi system or a situation where one can play the music with a lot of dynamic range. So we're limiting it a little bit. And then finally, for the LP, we have to take into account that the noise floor is quite up, and we have to add a little bit of compression to make sure that even the softest parts are very good, very well audible.
One of Erik's recommendations for this project was for me to try a new product called green vinyl. So I asked him, why green vinyl from a mastering point of view?
When I'm mastering for ordinary vinyl, you'll have to take into account that normal vinyl is quite limited in what it can do sound-wise. Green vinyl actually has a couple of advantages. It's much more quiet than normal vinyl, and therefore you can have more dynamic range. So you have to have, you can have less compression. It's not that different from ordinary vinyl when it comes to its behavior in frequency domain. So you don't have to add special EQ or things like that. So it's quite similar, but you have a bit better dynamic range.
We are making a record here from PET, the material. It's a plastics instead of PVC like conventional pressing is doing. And we're also not using a boiler, which is using natural gas to create steam.
Green vinyl is printed very much like a CD, in fact. And here in the video, you can see the robot removing the discs and setting them on the cooling racks and then stacking them up. And the thing about green vinyl is because it uses so much less energy to make, 90% less energy than a traditional vinyl, well, actually, it's much more sustainable, but the records themselves are not so hot in the first place, so the whole process is just a little bit quicker.